The PlayStation Vita itself is not relatively expensive in the grand scheme of, I don't want to say retro hardware, because the Vita is definitely not retro, but it's definitely getting a bit up there in age. It is 12 years old at this point. Yeah, it's definitely not expensive as it could be, you know, only a little over $100 maybe, but it's definitely worth the cost investment between the quality of the hardware that you're getting on top of the games itself. Also worth mentioning, if you do decide to pick up the Vita, I personally have the 2000 Slim model. That's just the one that I prefer for a couple of reasons, and I'm just gonna say it outright. Neither model of the PlayStation Vita is objectively better or worse. For me personally, and this is going to be a hot take that I'm not expecting anybody else to share, this is just me and my eyes. I don't know what it is. It's just something about my eyes. My eyes don't do good with OLEDs, and I'm not really sure why. Like, when I play on my Nintendo Switch OLED, I can only play on it for so long before my eyes just start to feel really tired. You know, like my parents, they have a big old 4K OLED TV, and for some reason, when I play on it or just watch it for too long, it just starts to mess with my eyes for a bit. So my eyes just do better with LCDs. So when I say this, just know that this is completely subjective for me, but I prefer LCDs over OLEDs. And the PlayStation Vita 1000 model does have an OLED, whereas the PlayStation Vita 2000 model, the Slim, has a LCD screen. But I've looked at both of them side by side, and while you can tell a difference when they're side by side, it is so slight that it is not going to impact your experience. Furthermore, I feel like there was a lot of quality of life improvements on top of just a lot of hardware improvements when it came to the 2000. You know, there's been a lot of weird stories between, like, you know, GPU crashes on the 1000, or certain, like, burn-in elements or blackenings with the OLEDs, and like weird artifacts on the OLEDs, because they are older OLEDs before the OLED was really like a mainstream thing, you know what I mean? It was one of the real first cracks at OLEDs in a mainstream piece of hardware, at least in the gaming scene. So there is some growing pains there in some scenarios. I'm not saying it's going to be the case for everybody, because you might be watching this with a 1000 being like, what are you talking about? My 1000s work fine since day one. And that's completely okay. I'm just talking about in some of the experiences that I've read about online, that I've seen in videos, and that people I have known have experienced and that I have seen with my very own eyes. Whereas with the 2000, I've never heard of such things. And again, I'm not saying that it's going to be the case for everybody or even anybody, because, you know, again, it's one of those situations where it's going to depend on the piece of hardware that you acquire, how well it's been taken care of, how well you take care of it, just how, sturdy the hardware was when it was built, you know what I mean? Like, you know, because obviously there's variables with each system, even though it goes on a manufacturing line, there's always going to be variables, there's always going to be faulty systems. So you might get a 2000 and it might just simultaneously combust while you're using it. It's really hard to say. But for me personally, the 2000, there's just, there's so many nice things about it, between the form factor and the way that it feels to use. The 1000 is still very comfortable, of course, but it's a bit more hefty, whereas the 2000, it feels just right in terms of the way that it feels, between the weight. It's just a very comfortable system. They also made the touchpad on the back a lot smaller, so you're not accidentally touching it all the time, which was something it always happened when I was using the 1000 model. They got rid of the proprietary charging port on the 1000, so you can actually just use a standard micro USB cable in here, which is very appreciated. And the battery life is also a good bit longer on here. Not substantially to where it's like, okay, this is going to be like a make it or break a difference, but you can get an extra like hour or two depending on what you're doing on the 2000. But again, depends on what you're doing. If you're playing an intensive game, at that point, the battery life, I mean, I don't know. Even then though, like, the battery life has always been really good for me. Like, I've always been able to get, like, I want to say, like, something like Uncharted, for example. I was able to run that for like the majority of a day before I'd even have to worry about plugging it in, and even then I could have ran it for a bit longer. So for me personally, I do just kind of prefer the 2000, but I would always recommend that you do your own research before making purchases. Do not just take my word for it. Watch reviews, watch comparison videos, compare prices online. If you get a good deal on one, it might be worth considering, even if you're looking at a different model. Just buy the one that you want at a good price and do your own research. I'm just giving my own personal experience and things that I have seen in the past.